We are recording.
All right, thank you. Good evening. I would like to call the March 23rd, 2021 Narragansett Regional School Committee Regional Agreement Amendment Committee to order. The first order of business tonight is going to be the approval of the February 23rd, 2021 meeting minutes. And does anybody have any questions or comments on them? I hope everybody had a chance to review them. I see none. With that, I see none. With that, can I get a motion to approve? If there's no questions or comments, a motion to approve them?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes as written.
Thank you.
Second.
Second?
Linda.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Linda. I didn't see that. Okay. So we will vote, and so I will start with Sheila Taylor. Ms. Taylor?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Bormil?
Yes.
Mr. Toth?
Yes.
Ms. Guthrie?
Yes.
Mr. Terrazini?
Yes.
Ms. Bennett?
Yes.
Ms. Ellis?
Yes.
Mr. Flynn? Kevin?
You're muted, Kevin.
I can hear you
Yes.
now. Yes, yes. Thank you, Kevin. And Mr. Mark says yes. Thank you. With that, yep. Let me just see. So now we have some discussion on old business. The first is the discussion on the swearing in of appointed members for the RAAC. And
Right.
Susan,
So-
I'll start with you. I believe, oh, Jay?
Actually, I think Jay,
I'm
yeah.
gonna start it. I think Susan is gonna help me with this, but
Okay,
I just wanted to give people an update on this. So Tim had raised a question about whether or not the at-large members of the group needed to be sworn in, and apparently there was a question on the part of, I think, a Templeton, either resident or town official, that it was necessary and it should be done. So first thing is, Mac and I wanted everybody to know that we were taking that question seriously, and we, between the last meeting and this one, we did some homework on that. In fact, quite a bit of homework. And so we had some information we put together and had a sidebar meeting, if I can call it that, with Dr. Cassavant and Tim. Susan was there, and I think Mac and I were there. And so our research into this indicated that the swearing in was not necessary. And we had spoken with the Department of Education, and we had also spoken with the Attorney General's office about this. But nonetheless, it was a concern on the part of some folks in Templeton. And we decided that the best thing going forward to just take this off the table and move forward was to ask the at-large members to be sworn in by the school committee chair. So we don't think it's necessary. And the reason for that is that this committee, and when this is going to come up in this meeting as we talk about section 4, subcommittees are advisory in nature. Their votes are not binding. And that's why we got the advice that we did. But again, we don't want questions about this process. And it seemed like the cleanest way to do it would be to ask. And I believe there are 4. Is it 4? Yeah, I think there are 4 people to be sworn in. It can happen remotely, whatever is easiest for folks, by the chairperson of the regional school committee. So beyond that, so that's what we agreed to do. And then perhaps, Susan, you have an update beyond that?
I was just going to say Margaret was unable to get to that this week. She had a couple scheduling conflicts. Our intent was to have that done by the time we met tonight.
Yeah.
So she is aware, and we're gonna be getting on it. So we'll be contacting the at-large members.
Okay, so
to get that done.
can we kind of commit to the idea that that will be done by the April meeting?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah. 'cause
Sheila and I did go down to town hall though and get sworn in through Templeton.
That would also suffice.
Oh,
So Sheila and I have already done that. We did
Okay.
that when they first asked us to do that when we were
Yeah,
appointed.
that would be sufficient. So that means only 2 more people, Susan, have to be.
okay,
Okay.
I'm all set with Phillipston also. I got a letter and everything.
okay.
Okay. So that
Great.
leaves how many?
I
2
don't know
people?
about Jim.
Jim Buzzell, yeah. I can, I'll email him and see. I don't hear from him much, but I will certainly try to reach out to him. It may
Okay.
be easier for him just to go to Templeton Town, I'm sorry, the Phillipston Town Hall, since that's what the other
Yes.
folks have done. But
Right, like I said, it could be done by the clerks, or it could be done by the school committee chair,
Right.
okay?
Okay.
So that seemed like the best way to resolve that. Tim, is Tim here? Did you want to add anything?
Jeff, yeah, absolutely. And the concern was raised by a citizen. We have had an onslaught of open meeting law violation complaints, and the whole intent was to make sure we didn't get caught in that spider web or go down a rabbit hole that none of us wanted to be in the middle of.
Yeah, it wasn't worth an argument. We did talk, though, going forward about the fact that this was not something that served as a guideline for the regional school committee going forward, but that for the purposes of this meeting and this committee, we would look for this as the answer, right?
Correct. I think this was a learning experience for all of us.
Okay. Okay, any questions on any of that? So we got what, all but 1 or 2 folks, and we'll have them wrapped up by April.
Correct.
Excellent. I think we can go to the document, Susan, if you can call that up so we can look at that.
Yep, just give me a second here and I'll see what I can do. March.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yep. Can everybody see that okay?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm seeing people nod. Okay, so the minutes indicate from the last meeting that we have tentative agreement on the composition of the committee. We have tentative agreement on the fact that we're going to pursue legislative approval for that would allow the district to do the elections at the same time the town does. And in fact, I want to speak to that for a minute. So also between the last meeting and this one, we have drafted a letter with sample language and put the addresses on it for your state senator and your state rep, Susanna Whips and Ann Goby, I believe, are the 2 people who represent you in the Mass legislature. And Chris and Susan have that letter. So that is what you need to start the process of doing that. And Susan, what I would add, sort of just a reminder, I did not put the name of the school committee chair at the bottom. I just put Chris's name. So you should add that, okay?
Yes.
And then if Mac and I can be of any assistance going forward, let us know, but that should get the ball rolling, and it's not an uncommon request, and hopefully one that they can put through for you.
Also, there's a copy of that draft letter in the Google Drive for anyone that
Great.
wants
Yep.
to have a look at it.
So we also reached tentative agreement on how to fill vacancies, and we also reached tentative agreement on section 5, powers and duties. So the minutes also suggest that we skipped over, I think it's section 4 and sections number 4 and number 6. Could you scroll down to those? Because I was hoping we could clean that up today. Yeah, so there's this organization one, okay? So I don't know if people had a chance to review this, but basically, after the election is over, this is pretty standard procedure. In fact, it's very standard procedure. The committee organizes itself and they vote to appoint a chairperson and a vice chair. And they also have a treasurer and a secretary. This language about it may be the same person, need not be a member of the committee is standard language in the regional agreements. Fix a time and place for the meetings, and that the chairperson, and this is what I was referring to earlier, can appoint with the committee persons to serve on subcommittees annually. So those are, again, those are subcommittees are always advisory. They're not committees that have binding votes. So that's, I don't know if folks have questions, but I was going to ask for a vote on tentative agreement here, Jeff. Are there any comments or questions?
I do not see any, Jay, so with that, and I don't have any myself, so, I mean, with that, we can certainly take a, actually, I'll take a motion to vote. Is it-
I'll
oh,
make a motion to tentatively approve this section as written.
As written. Thank you, Katrina. And a second?
I'll second. Sheila?
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Sheila. So, and actually, Sheila, so we will do a roll call vote, and Ms. Taylor,
Yes.
Ms. Bullmill,
Yes,
Mr. Toth,
Yes.
thank you. Ms. Guthrie,
Yes.
Mr. Terenzini,
Yes.
Ms. Bennett,
Yes.
thank you. Ms. Ellis,
Yes.
Mr. Flynn,
Yes.
and Mr. Marks says yes, and that is unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Thanks, everybody. So the next one is Mac has highlighted this in yellow. This might require some conversation, but this is where we define a quorum for the committee. And the preference was at the last meeting that people can be physically present or participating remotely. So that's in there. And then it's the last sentence that hopefully we can resolve tonight. The background, as you may remember, is that the voice that Phillipston has is the smaller community, and what's appropriate, what do you want going forward. This last sentence would change the majority vote requirement. So right now you've got 8 members on the committee, if I'm not mistaken, and of 5 people voting in favor means that a motion would pass. So this would mean it could still be 5, but one of those 5 has to be a Phillipston representative. And the way this is written is it would pertain to all votes, not just special ones. Okay. Looking at it in a constructive sense, it requires the community to function together and to not be fixated on town boundaries and look at things from a district perspective and work toward agreement from both communities. So as we were preparing for the meeting, our thinking was that this would be something that you would keep in, and it would give Phillipston I don't want to gloss over the fact that it's a significant change, or not, or you could leave it out and the majority vote is still 5 members from wherever, whatever community they represent. So comments or questions about that?
Can I just ask, should that actually read at least 1 vote?
I think you could put in at least, I'm not sure it's required.
Okay.
That's the kind of thing that, if it includes 1 vote, that means 1 vote.
Okay.
Are you worried that if it was 2, it would raise a complication?
That would be my concern, yes. If it was more
Yeah.
than 1 where it doesn't read that way, yes.
Yeah, we could, to avoid that, yeah, we could change it to say a minimum of 1 vote from each member town, yeah. That's a good point.
So are there any other questions or comments on this portion of it?
Not yet. Carter.
I'm sorry, Kevin, did you say?
I
was
think
it-
Carter had his hand up.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm not even seeing that. Okay.
Linda, I think, does too.
So first, my apologies for missing the last two meetings. I was committed to another project. I'm wondering where this comes from because I think the committee's worked reasonably well under the current setup. And the idea that this has to be put in here in order to make folks talk together and work together reminds me of the debate over the Senate 60 vote rule. That rule has not necessarily generated any better conversation or, if you will, bipartisanship or by-town decision-making. I'm not understanding why this last sentence needs to be in here.
Okay, so can I clarify that for a moment, Jeff?
Yeah, absolutely. Please, Jay.
It doesn't need to be in here, okay? It's a suggestion that came up as a result of Mac and I doing some research about other agreements, but no, it doesn't need to be here. If the amendment committee feels as though the regional school committee has functioned smoothly without such a thing, fine. We're just putting it out there, and if folks don't want it there, that's okay.
Any discussion on whether or not this should, whether folks feel this should be included or not be included?
I personally, I think it's a good idea to include it. And please, Carter, don't compare us to Congress.
Kevin, I almost used the phrase nuclear option and I held back on that one.
We have so many other things. Please don't do that. No, I think it's actually something that would help give a sense of to the people in Phillipston that they are getting a little more control in it. That there is a difference between that unholy body in Washington and us here, in that we are structured in a way that no matter what the votes are, it's always going to be 3-5 on the board. And that outfit in Washington, it might change from one party to the other as to who has the majority of votes. And so there's a structural difference between the two of them. And this way, it helps to give an assurance. We don't have, an upper and a lower house here. We only have one house of delegates. I think it gives an assurance to the to the minority group that there's some protections for them. That always seems to be a concern for those people. I think last time we met, I think Gerhard just didn't get the idea. I mean, he kept going over it and didn't quite get it. And I just if he was in the room with me, I was going to kick him under the table because he just didn't seem to, he was arguing against it. And I was like, no, this is a good thing. This is something that you can sell to people in Phillipston. I think it's a good idea. I thought that is it Jay and had mentioned that there were some other places perhaps that had used something like this, but where you have a quite an imbalance in the size of the towns the way that we do, and a structure built that, I mean, one town's always going to be the majority on the board, and so we're trying to give a reason to the smaller partner to say, you really should sign up for this and to continue where you are. We're protecting your interests. We're going to make it so that we're going to try and give every reason for the two sides to come and agree on a course of action, because by requiring them to try and pursue that. And I probably talked too long, so.
I agree with Kevin. I appreciated the gesture very much when the Mars gentleman came up with this suggestion. I would not have been arguing for more representation as other people were. I think the balance of the number of people is fine, but I appreciate this as a protectionary measure for certain things. And Linda still has a hand up.
Linda, go ahead.
I know this is a hot button in town, a real hot button. So I appreciate the language that was put in here, but I think we need time to really digest it and think about it. And I appreciate you trying to be fair to both towns with this. I think it's very important. Because a lot of hard feelings in both towns. So thank you. But I think we need time to think about this one too.
Well, just as a sort of an additional comment, it does somewhat tie into the conversation in past meetings about folks who wanted to change the composition of the committee. But as Kevin noted, you've got, this is basically about an 85-15 kind of split between the two towns. So changing the composition of the committee is really not, at least in our estimation, something we'd recommend. But this is language that in one form or another, it surfaces in agreements where you have a big and a small community. And it is, I find myself, for what it's worth, agreeing that it does. I don't know why it's not a good thing for Phillipston. It gives them a little bit more of a voice, and it brings the committee together. Not that they aren't already, but yeah. So that's why it's there. And as to the it does sometimes take different forms. Sometimes you have. We have reservations about this, but there are agreements that specify different votes. So it would not be that a majority vote would require a minimum of one vote from each member town in all cases, but you'd say, well, when you're hiring a superintendent, if I can use that example, then when you're hiring a new superintendent, the majority vote must include a minimum of one from each member town and that sort of thing. So that's something that has occurred in our past experience. Any other comment?
Jeff, if I
Yep,
might.
go ahead, Carter.
I personally think that this is something that needs a little digestion. I understand Kevin's point. Others may view it as effectively an embargo being possible. I'm not sure that would happen. I think that the committee structures worked fairly well. I have always questioned why the committee has an even number of representatives. It's the only committee I've ever seen, and there may be more, I haven't seen them all, that have an even number. Everything I've always seen in my career has been an odd number. And I'm interested in exploring these special votes, if you will, that Jay just spoke of. So I'm going to move to table action on section 6 until such time as Jay can present information on these so-called special votes, and it can be discussed in conjunction with the size of the committee.
Okay, well, we can, if that's of interest to the committee, we can bring a sample of issues that that you might look over at the April meeting. Is that the idea?
I would leave the calendaring of the discussion to the chair
Okay.
of this committee. But I think that having a discussion of this effectively veto with the odd numbers of members of the committee and these special votes that you've spoken of would be a good package of items for discussion, and that there might be compromise in discussing them as a group.
Okay, well, it's not difficult, Carter, to bring a sample of things to you either at the next meeting or later. The issues are usually structural. They focus on like important matters. They're not about whether or not you're going to accept the milk bids for the next year.
They're often about the superintendent and the budget.
Yeah, they also include things like sometimes changing grade configurations,
Sure.
things like that. Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
the calendar, if this motion is successful, I would leave the calendaring of the discussion to the chair.
Sure. Okay. Anything else?
Actually, does Linda, I see your hand up again. Do you have another question or a comment?
Yeah, I do. I agree with Carter, and I also question the even number on the board and feel that odd numbers have always served committees well. And I would
I'm
love,
having some computer issues right now, so I'm gonna just mute for a second. And
okay,
try to
and
fix them.
Jay,
So
I
I'll
think
be right with you
bringing in a
guys.
sample of the issues at the next meeting is a fabulous idea.
Okay. We've lost our document temporarily.
Oh. And Tim, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Quite all right. While I understand the intent, I'm not quite sure I understand the rationale why to add this language. The original agreement was drafted back in the 50s. It was revised in 2004. And it's not an us, a them, it's a we. And this regional district needs to be functioning as a we. That's just my 2 cents.
Oh, I'm sorry, Katrina, go ahead.
That's okay. I think it was just brought up because I think it was Gerhard had a sense that with the 5-3 split that Templeton really could just do anything they wanted with the majority. So where you add that language in, yes, we should be operating as a we thing, but it just gives the minority that reassurance that the majority can't just run the show. Like it gives them a sense that, if they think something's really not right, they do have a say and they can stop it. And I mean, if you're in the minority, you don't want kind of a dictatorship. You want to have kind of a fail safe in the worst case scenario. If the other town's doing something you really don't want and you really don't feel is effective, there has to be some way for them to say no.
I agree with that assessment completely. And, I don't want to get too personal in here, but speaking from Phillipston, we've already lost the school, which was the biggest thing we've always tried to fight for and keep open. But who knows what could happen in the future. And I would appreciate this language being in there just to have some kind of check and balance between the two towns.
Okay. So Jeff, do you want to, we can put this on the agenda for the next meeting and give people a little more time to think it over. I'll bring a list of issues that Carter has suggested we look into. And we'll talk it over again. That sounds like the way people want to go. Might be interesting to have a straw vote at the next meeting to see where people stand so we can kind of move the conversation along a little bit, because we do have to get this resolved. Going back to my agenda here. We are, I think, looking at section 2 at this point. Okay. So this is we've talked about this before, but it's standard provision in regional agreements, and you're just saying what kind of a regional school district you are. The black print is from your old agreement, and we just have some updates that are really in the nature of references. It's about kids who reside near a town. It's about being able to join or form an educational collaborative, and also about being able to access the rights of Chapter 74 with vocational technical if needed. So kind of hoping for a tentative agreement vote on this one as well.
So I just open it up for discussion. Is there any questions or comments on this one? Seeing none, I would ask for a motion to approve section 2 as written.
I'll make a motion to approve section 2 as written.
I should say tentatively approve it, but yes. Second on that?
I'll second Sheila.
Thank you, Sheila. And again, so we would do a roll call vote, and I will start with Ms. Taylor,
Yes.
Ms. Bowmill,
Yes.
Mr. Toth,
Yes.
Ms. Guthrie,
Yes.
Mr. Terenzini,
Yes,
Ms. Bennett,
Yes,
Ms. Ellis,
Yes,
Mr. Flynn,
Yes,
and Mr. Marks says yes. So that is unanimous on tentatively accepting section 2 as written.
Which brings us to, again, section 3. And I don't think that there was a lot of disagreement about this one either. Stating that the committee can accept for enrollment students from other towns, which is a good thing to have in there, even if it very rarely happens. This is not about school choice, by the way. And some assignment language that gives the superintendent guidelines about assigning students to schools. And of course, you've got fewer schools than you did before, but nonetheless, this is language from the old agreement. We don't need to change it. And it does require a supermajority vote when it goes beyond the 10% margin.
sorry,
that would be all.
what is a tuition student if not school choice?
So there are times when this is pretty rare, but sometimes in rural parts of the state, this happens that a district does not operate its own high school. And I worked in the Berkshires for about 8 or 9 years, and this was actually something that happened every year. So for those districts that just have elementary schools, they have to negotiate a tuition agreement with somebody who does have a high school. Usually it's a neighboring district. But it can also, so it allows you to take those kids in and to negotiate a tuition amount with the sending district, sending community. There are, I don't know, I can't think of other circumstances that would lead to this, but
Jay, could I,
there could
Jay,
be
if
an
I could interject?
extenuating circumstance with an individual student where you might want to negotiate. But that is, in my experience, that's what it's for.
Jay, if I could add there to that. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Often that happens with special education students. You might have a program in your district and you only have 2 or 3 children that can benefit from that program. Maybe a neighboring town might only have 1 student and they can't afford to have a program for that 1 student, and they might tuition that student to your district for that special education service.
So it's a good thing to have in general. It's a good door to have open. I think Linda has a question.
Oh, thank you. Go ahead, Linda.
thanks. Why are we taking out the wording regional district school? And who sets the tuition rate?
You, regional district school committee. It's because at the beginning of the document, we agree to use terms that are simpler as the document goes on. So the committee refers to the regional district committee, and that is spelled out in the introduction, or it will be. As to the tuition amount, it's negotiated. So If the sped directors might sit down and with input from their superintendents have some parameters that would guide their conversation about what the cost would be and how and when it's paid, perhaps twice during the year, perhaps 3 times or 4 times during the year. Generally, you want to be fair to both sides. You know, that's the way these things work. They're frustrating when they're not fair to both sides. That's generally, and then sometimes also it gives you if you're the receiving district, you enter into conversations to see if you need to talk about a cost increase in an ensuing year. So it's really something you have control over.
But what about a regular ed student or a whole grade level of regular ed students? Like say, I don't know, maybe Peter Sam wants to do a contract with us to tuition some kids over.
Right.
Who would negotiate that?
Well, the superintendents would probably start that process and then keep their respective school committees informed about the course of the conversation to make sure that it was acceptable to the elected representatives. And then you come up with a 1-year agreement or a 2-year agreement or whatever, but it's a mutually negotiated amount.
And generally, the school committee would be voting on that number.
Correct.
Thank you. I thought so. But so we don't need that language in there?
No.
Mr. Terrazzini, do you have a question?
I have just one comment and one question. First, having lived in the Berkshires, Otis is a town that frequently tuitions its students out, and normally
That's right.
when I was there, the annual vote to continue to accept those tuition students included the amount that the tuition would be at. It was normally part of the motion. My question, however, surrounds the 7/8 by making it 7 out of 8. So what happens in the instance that there's only 6 school committee members there that night? No action can be taken. Percentage approach, I think, of whatever number you pick, whether it's 75% or 80% or whatever number you pick, is more appropriate, because otherwise something could simply not be able to be acted upon just because of the absence of some members. And I think that most members of the select boards I've worked with in the school committee certainly do their very best to be present at as many meetings as possible. But you might not have 7 members that evening. And I would encourage you to think in terms of a percentage of the committee voting, as opposed to a strict number. The percentage also, should the group over time believe that the even number of 8 should be increased to 9, or perhaps that would then not require you to remember to come back and revisit this section if you used a percentage vote as opposed to a strict number of members. So that is my question with respect to this section.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn?
I'm looking at that same section as well, and I'm kind of wondering what purpose it serves any longer, since we really only have 3 school buildings now. We have a middle school, high school, and an elementary school in the district. So we're not assigning students. I'm trying to understand, and I guess it's a question for the group. If someone could give me an example where we might be shifting students so that more than 10% of the students of the whole school would be from out of the town. I know what it was before. It was that was the old safeguard for Phillipston, so that if the students were shifted in or out of Phillipston Elementary and it was more than 10%, there would be a protection. But that's gone now. So I'm trying to understand what are we trying to accomplish with that section now? Why is that there? I don't know what the purpose is for it now.
Go ahead, Katrina.
I think it's kind of just as a fail-safe. I would think that 5 years ago when they were making the original one, they wouldn't have thought that Phillipston would be closed. Something crazy might happen. Maybe they'll build a new building in Phillipston and it'll be awesome. And there'll be a budget to put the kids back there. If the clause is there, then we wouldn't have to revisit this if for whatever reason they wanted to go back. I think if the clause stays there, it doesn't hurt to be in there. And then there's always the availability if for whatever reason something happens and we have to shift students to a different building, there's a fail-safe that they can do that without having to revisit it.
I would just respond to one of the previous comments. If the number of school committee members were ever to change to 9, for example, this regional agreement would have to be redone. So that could be fixed at that time. The percentage concept, I think, is a good concept. The issue is, do people think that that issue is significant enough that 7 school committee members should be present? Can moving 10% of the kids, would that be okay if only 5 members were there to have that done? So I think that's the reason that was in there, but it doesn't have to be.
Well, the reason it was there, Mac, was, as I said, was this was Phillipston's protection. It was the safety so that students couldn't be moved in or out of the Phillipston Elementary School beyond the 10% limit without 2 members, 7 out of 8. There were 3 Phillipston reps. So it was going to require at least 2 of them were going to have to vote in favor.
Right.
But I'm just trying to understand why we have it in there now. And I don't know, maybe something will happen that Phillipston will decide to tear down the old school and build a brand new one where there are no students in there at the moment. Stranger things have happened, but I'm just trying to understand what it's there for now. And I think that goes back to the earlier question about having the requirement that Phillipston, at least one Phillipston representative has to be voting in favor of whatever the issue is before the board, the school committee. Well, that was the new protection because this is not going to work for us anymore the way it is now. This worked when we had schools in 2 different towns, but we don't have that anymore. This is what Phillipston people are going to point to. When this comes to town meeting floor, or when we take this back to the Board of Selectmen, this is what they're going to point to, and they're going to say, this is dead now. There's no protection for us because we don't have students in this school anymore. This school is closed and it can't be used as a school now. That's been made clear to us. So, you know, I'm just pointing out, I'm trying to say, is there some other way that this worked for us? I don't see it. So I'm asking the group, if you can tell us what the argument will be to be made to our people when we come back to them, I'd love to hear it.
I would make the argument that this is our protection if we decide to build a new school that meets all the criteria. This is our fail-safe that we can go back, negotiate with the school committee and say we want, maybe instead of just Phillipston kids, maybe we want K through 3rd in this new building that Phillipston built. Then we can put 5th grade back in Templeton. It just gives more. This would give Phillipston the availability to say, we have a building now, it's appropriate, we'd like to figure out how we can use it.
And in the meantime, then we have no protection against whatever, then we're back where we are with no protection against, we're the minority partner and the 5 Templeton voters will be running the show. The Templeton reps can run the show. That's what the Phillipston people are going to say. That's what Gerhard was trying to say the other week.
But I think with
5 Templeton representatives will be able to control all the votes.
But I think with this and the other piece, you can say, you know, can we come up with a way that it's feasible and fiscally responsible to get the kids back in Phillipston? Because it seems like that's the holdup is that ideally, I understand that Phillipston residents want the kids back in Phillipston. Fiscally, it doesn't make sense. So there would have to be a plan in a place that fiscally made sense for the kids to be there. I don't know what that plan is. And again, I don't think there's anything in the works anytime soon, but this gives them the out if 5, 10, you know, I don't know how, clearly we don't renew this as often as we should. But this wording is there if, you know, the last one was 15 years. So 15 years from now, if there's another building, the wording is there that the plan is in place, that they at least have the availability to move the kids.
Okay, well, I don't think we're going to solve it tonight. I'm just putting it out there to say, this is, I think, what we're going to hear when we go back to talk to our people. You know, so we need to be aware of that. That's all.
So Kevin, what would be your suggestion?
I'm not sure that this does us any good at the moment, so I'm not sure why it's there. You know, I think it's a straw man. It's hollow for us right now. I think the earlier piece that we had that gave us a requirement that Phillipston has to be represented in the majority votes is we can sell to the people in Phillipston. I don't think this is going to be a selling point. On the odd chance that sometime in the future, the town may build a brand new school. Well, maybe, I don't know, maybe so. I don't see it right now.
Yeah, Kyle?
I hope I'm not muddying the waters too much here, but
Go ahead.
I'm thinking into the future, when perhaps the two communities decide that a neighboring town, such as Winchendon, were to join the district. They do have elementary school at this point still. And having this in the agreement ahead of time, where they or Hubbardston or some other partner come onto the scene, I think would have it resolved for the future as they looked at the agreement. So I think that it certainly is questionable by Phillipston at the moment, but I think that there is perhaps, if the group thinks that the committee might ever entertain admission of another partner, or if the Phillipston think that there might at some point in the future be a elementary school built by Phillipston, or that there may be merit in keeping it in some form, provided I go back to the issue of using a percentage of vote as opposed to a strict committee number. So Kevin, that's my only thought on that.
Okay.
I agree. I think it's okay to leave it there. It doesn't do any harm to leave it. But if there were going to be any new members, that we would have to completely redo the agreement then anyway. But then this language would be there easily for us to review at that time. And I think it's a good idea to keep it.
And that was Christine. Linda, do you have another question, or was that Linda?
Oh, yes, I have lots of questions.
Okay.
I agree, Carter. I agree with you totally. I can see us being partners with neighboring towns, and I think that language is super important. I disagree, Carter, about the percentage. I do like the 7 out of 8, or the 6 out of 7, or the 8 out of 9. I do like that in there too. So maybe those numbers will change, but I think it needs to be in there.
I don't see any other, so I guess for now, I think we're gonna move on from this one, Jay.
Yeah, let me, so we're hearing some good ideas here, and I think I'm just trying to sort of put this together and get my arms around it. One, between now and the next meeting, Mac and I can work on some of the contingencies that you've raised. I mean, one of the things that please understand, I'm thinking out loud here, and that's all, is that, you know, if there were ever an additional school in the district, that assignment of students and grade configurations would need to be approved by a supermajority of the school committee, so that you safeguarded Phillipston's voice in how things happened. The other thing is, I do find myself, for what it's worth, I don't think that language that sort of accommodates absenteeism is the way to go. You can do it if you want, but if it's an important vote, people should be there. And this would be an important vote. So we can explore some things like that. We can put the percentage out there so people can see what that looks like. It's, I mean, unless my arithmetic's wrong, it's like an 87 or 90% vote in favor. And maybe even some alternative wording, because this is really about, should there be, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's about, should there be an additional school at some point in the future, whether that be through a new partnership or through new construction. So we can bring back those words to accommodate those ideas. Any other, Mac, do you have anything else to add?
No, I think
Quick
there's a good
general
argument both ways.
Okay, so we are, I think we're moving on to, okay, the section on, which is the new section 4. And this is the conversation that we had about, I think this was all pretty straightforward, because this is really about leasing. And so it's really about the Templeton School, the middle school, high school is owned by the district, if I'm understanding things correctly. And this is about the yellow highlight and whether or not the cost of improvements or repairs should be increased from 5. 25 was just a suggestion. And the committee wanted to see a sample of repair projects that had been done in the district in the recent past. And I believe Anne Marie had put that together. Do you want to call that up, Susan? Can you access that?
I can, let me see. Hold on one second here.
I think this was this also sent out to people? I think it was.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any chance you could walk us through this, Anne Marie? She's still here.
Sure. Yeah. So there's actually 2 pages. This one particular one here is the repairs that have been done to Phillipston over the last 5 years. There's a second page that has repairs to Baldwinville and Templeton. And obviously you can see there hasn't been much done to those 2 schools, because in the last 5 years that the facilities director, Rick Moulton, and I have been working with this, we knew a new school was being built in Templeton. So only emergency, basically, repairs were done to the 2 Templeton elementary schools. But in Phillipston, we've worked pretty well, I thought, with the selectmen over the last few years about meeting with them and talking about the different projects that needed to happen and the things that were more of a priority to be fixed than others. And you can see on the right-hand column under the funding source, the district has worked together with the town to do some of the larger projects, like install the digital card access systems and some security cameras. And then you can see that the district, under its normal maintenance for Phillipston, has replaced and repaired quite a few of other just general maintenance type items. So I don't know if everyone wants me to read through them all, or if anyone has questions on this, because everyone, I think, has had it before tonight.
Yeah, that's fine. That's great. Thank you. So are there comments or questions? Katrina has her hand up.
My only question is, so as the agreement's written now, so the first 5,000 was covered by the school committee and everything over 5,000 was covered by the individual town. Is that how it's been working?
That's
Yes.
correct.
Okay. And has that seemed, I don't know a thing about it. So has that seemed to work okay with the towns and the school committee? Has the towns been receptive to that?
From our point, yes, like with the new elementary school being built in Templeton, we didn't really have the same opportunity to work with Templeton on their billings. Like this is at least from my standpoint. I've only been doing this particular job and involved with these type of things for the last 5 years, same as the facilities director. I know in the past, the old facilities director, he did do stuff, but I was not a part of it, so I can't speak to that. It's worked very well with Phillipston. We've gone to them for the small things. Usually what would happen is the selectmen and the facilities director at the end of the school year would walk through the buildings with each other and they would talk about, what would the selectmen like to see done? What does the facility director see that needs to be done? And they would just kind of like decide what's priority and what is the cost? Where does it fall? Does it fall under the district's maintenance or is it something larger that we need to involve the towns with? So I think that this method has worked well. The dollar amount, $5,000, I think is fair. It could go a little higher, but you can see like the majority of like these major expenses typically fall below $5,000.
So, Amber, I'm gonna go to Katrina and then Tim. I know you have your hand up too, but Katrina, go ahead. Do you have a question?
No, that was from before. I didn't.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
That's okay.
Tim?
Now, the hand keeps disappearing from what I can see. I don't know if you folks can see it. Historically, and speaking as a resident taxpayer in the town of Templeton for coming up on 25 years, this magic $5,000 has been the break point where the school will take care of it to an amount, but if they can push it beyond the 5, it pushed over to the town. And the example I would give you is the most recent re-roofing of the middle school complex, which got into the tens of thousands of dollars. That's not on the table right now for discussion. I personally believe $5,000 is a laughable amount in today's day and age. Look at the cost of building supplies right now alone. And this number probably needs to be in the 50,000 or above range to make it equitable and across board. That is me speaking as a citizen taxpayer, and that's all I have to say on that.
I just want to be clear that the middle high school building is a totally separate thing. That is paid for completely by the district unless it needs to go for a debt exclusion and for a capital assessment to the towns for something major like a roof or something. This document just is talking about the individual buildings that are owned by the towns.
I hear what you're saying, Ms. Geister, but as we look at the Baldwinville Elementary and when we had the East Templeton Elementary and even the Templeton Center, a lot of things got left to fall behind the wayside, especially once we started looking at surplusing buildings and replacing Templeton Center. So again, as a taxpayer citizen, I will challenge that comment because I know the amount of overrides, cost overruns, expenditures, debt exclusions we voted through to keep the schools afloat.
So it sounds like everybody thinks that it needs to be higher. Is there anybody who thinks besides Ms. Geister that thinks that it should be it should stay at 5,000? Just trying to figure out where we all are to figure out where we go from here.
Got some hands up.
Go ahead, Carter.
Just a question. Do we know the year that this 5,000 number was adopted as a for instance, and I know that general inflation can run behind building and construction inflation. But if this was a 1980 number, on a straight inflation basis, that's around $15,000 today. Do we have any sense of when this $5,000 number was first adopted?
I don't know of another number, so I think it's been around for quite a long time.
That means it would probably go back to at least the 97 agreement.
I'll look it up.
Linda?
I hear you about the $5,000, but I also know how much the town of Phillipston has paid out over the years for our school. And I know that Templeton has always done a great job with financing their school projects. We didn't build a new school and we liked our school, but we are prepared to do some maintenance in our town now, which is going to cost a lot. And so I think 5,000, I agree with Anne Marie, it's fine.
I think it could be raised, but I think 25,000 is in excess of what's normal. I mean, and the thing is if we're going to do a repair that's $25,000, I would think that if something was 22,000, that more than just school committee might want to have a say in that, but that's just my opinion.
So, and I think the 25,000, I'm just afraid that things would be pushed off too much. I do agree with Carter. I think that we should take a look at the inflation rate and look at that. But I would have to say $25,000, I think is a little bit much. I would think even if we went to $10,000 or $15,000, that would be, I mean, honestly, I would want to look at that and find out where the original number came from. But, you know, being in the field, $5,000 really is not going to cover a whole bunch of it these days. So.
Mac, do you have a sense of where that, did that go back even further than 97? Were you able to figure that out?
I'm looking at the previous ones. Just a minute. I'll hopefully get it here in a minute.
Looks like Sheila Taylor has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sheila.
I was just going to agree that I think in this day and age, $5,000 is not going to be sufficient, especially if anything above that amount is going to be funded just by Templeton. I realize that Phillipston did not build the school, but I think it has to be a reasonable amount that can be accommodated for repairs split between the two towns under the operating budget before it would kick into a capital expense.
Thank you, Sheila.
Anne Marie, how much is set aside in the normal budget for such things? Like, and is there a limit of how many repairs it can do in a certain year? Like if you have like 10 $5,000 things, is there 50,000 sitting there?
No, currently the maintenance budget for Templeton is 15,000 and it's already over expended.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we were gonna have a minimum that the school, like anything over 25,000 was going to be paid for by the town, and anything under, we would have to increase that line item quite a bit, because just normal maintenance, 15,000 isn't enough. So if we're gonna have to have like a set aside of 25,000 in case there's a major project that we can cover, we're gonna have to raise our budget by that amount to make sure that that maintenance line has enough money in it to cover something extraordinary.
I think Sheila has a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sheila.
Sorry, I forgot to lower my hands.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff, I have kind of a exploratory question, if I can call it that. I'm wondering if we could come back to you with a number that represented an inflation correction on this number, okay? And then see how many people would find that acceptable. So let's imagine that this thing comes from, I'm just making up an example, 1995, or maybe it comes from the year 2000 or the 2004 agreement, that we get some sort of a, without, asking the Federal Reserve here, we just use an inflation index and try to come up with a number about what 5 turns into in the year 2021. And I'm wondering how many people, even if we just did a straw vote right now, not a tentative agreement vote, but just a straw vote, about how many people would find that reasonable.
While you're doing that, to answer your question, I did not find it in the 1977 agreement. I found it the first time in the 2004 agreement.
Okay, so it's about what, 16, 17 years old. Any thoughts on my suggestion about doing a correction for inflation and as a reasonable way to come up with a proposed number?
I think that seems reasonable.
Matt, can I just ask you, you said where you found it, was there another number before that in the earlier version, or did it just appear in the, I think it was 94 you said?
I didn't see any other number in the
There was no other number.
Previous version.
Yep.
So I believe it was instituted in 2004.
Okay.
I will read it more carefully after we finish, but I didn't see it there.
And Jay, to answer your question, I think that will be a good idea, just to look at the inflation rate and see what the number comes out to be. I think that's a good starting point anyways.
Okay. I know there's there's voices on both sides here. I'm just wondering if we can compromise on where this might need to be given the next several years that the district is facing. So that's what we'll do. I'm wondering if Susan can take that list down. And go back to the agreement. And we've got about, well, we don't have very much time, but I think Mac might want to introduce the, right, a little further down. There you go.
I'm
So-
thinking, given the time,
Do you want to hold off on this,
that
Mac, or
we
not?
probably should. I would just make introductory comments. It appears that there is a lot of new language, which is in red in sections 5, 6, and 7, which are essentially about the budget, about the assessments, and about debt. And that's true. There is a lot of new language there. But I believe we will be able to show you that there is no change in any of this or what you're doing already. Anne Marie is using the statutory method. There's a formula in here now because your current agreement does not have a formula, but it would not change anything that we understand of what you're doing right now. So it's just trying to clarify things. We've added some language which is coming directly from the laws. For example, there's a section on what would happen if the school committee wants to raise the budget after it has been approved by both of your towns. But that's coming right out of the law books. If the school committee chooses to do that, they have to follow these regulations. So I don't believe, unlike the 5,000 to 25,000, which is obviously significantly different, we don't believe that there is any change here. So I guess we'd ask you if you would study these sections 5, 6, and 7 for next time, and we'll go through it. And obviously you can raise any questions. That doesn't mean there aren't things that can be changed here. We can't change what's in the law, but there are certainly things that can be changed about how you assess the towns or whatever. So if we can all be prepared to go through this next time, I think it doesn't make sense to start that right now, if that's okay.
No, that probably makes some sense, Mac. So it looks like, just in a general sense, that we'll be revisiting the provision or the language there that speaks to a minimum of 1 vote from both towns. we'll present a list of possible issues that might require a minimum of 1 vote from each town rather than having all the votes require that. And then we will also bring up or revisit this language that involves assignment of students and whether that should stay in the agreement or not going forward, whether there's a percentage vote or whether there's a head count vote. And then finally, an inflationary adjustment on the cost ceiling that's in section 4. And then get into the language that Mac is talking about, much of which is, like he says, it mirrors current practice and is simply required to be included in the document. Some of it, though, it bears discussion. Carter had a question.
Oh, go ahead, Carter, I'm sorry.
Well, in a very quick review of this, there is certainly consistent with present practice. However, shortly after I came to Templeton, and to my knowledge, unless Tim or Amy were to correct me, there is a change that Templeton has been seeking in this section. And that is that there would be a 2-step budget process. The first would be that the committee would present a draft budget by February 15th. The importance of this is that under current practice, the Templeton Town Administrator has to present a balanced budget to the Select Board and Finance Committee in the last week of February. And without at least a draft budget in place, he's or she is shooting in the dark. And we had asked for the final school budget, not by the statutory deadline of March 31, but by March 15. And the reason for that is that essentially by the first week of April, the first few days of April, the budget has to be finalized to be presented to the town meeting. And getting a final school budget on March 31, in particular, if it's been shooting in the dark since February sometime, leaves very little time to balance out the town budget. The school committee has worked diligently, I will say, to try to meet those timelines. And I think that from, I wasn't with you through this year's budget process, but I really do want to applaud the school committee for having been collaborative and listening to us on our need for these numbers earlier in the process. But Tim or Amy, please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe our position in seeking those changes has altered from when we first started.
Carter, what is the date of the first town meeting?
I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me right now.
Is the March 15th date that you're asking for, is that more than 45 days before?
It is.
It is, yeah.
It is, because the budget has to be balanced and printed in the warrant and distributed, and there's other timelines, and there's just too little time if the town doesn't get a final school budget till March 31.
That's helpful. If I could ask Jeff if there are any other general things that we should be thinking about before next meeting when we go through the budget that we could maybe have some thoughts about, as Carter has mentioned. We certainly will go through that, Carter. Anybody else have any other issues that you would like us to address next time?
Couple quick comments.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Tim.
As I'm looking through this new section 4B, that last 7 sentences where we have the $5,000, $25,000 question. If we read to the end of that, there shall be considered a capital cost paid solely and entirely by the town in which the building is located. That's going to be the hard sell in Templeton, since all district buildings are now in Templeton, nothing in Phillipston. But then I flip forward to page 13, we start talking about apportioned capital costs, and there is a breakout with a per capita and per student ratio. So the language within our current document doesn't even support itself. To Carter's point on getting the budgets in, the Templeton Town meeting is May 17th. We had the school budget presentation to the Board of Selectmen and the Advisory Committee March 15th. They met that deadline. Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they also met the initial deadline to get the initial presentation in. Is that correct?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but I feel like yes, otherwise it would have been a topic of discussion.
Yeah, I'm seeming to think we did meet both of those benchmarks, which is phenomenal. It shows a lot of work by this committee and by the school committee to take this seriously and work it through. I really do think the district committee is working to benefit both communities.
Tim, I don't have that right in front of me. I can't see it all, but I'm wondering if the discrepancy that you pointed out is part of it on the regional system where the region owns the secondary schools. There's a different capital process than there is for town-owned buildings.
Leasing, right.
And I'm thinking that may be the discrepancy that you're talking about.
Yeah, it starts on page 12 of the document, a portion cost incurred by the district. It doesn't divide it down any further than that. That's what I'm saying. This isn't quite agreeing with itself. That would be the new section 6, and then it goes from there.
It is the
Right.
difference of the middle high school complex being a regional asset. Both towns paid to build it, so it's owned by the district. Templeton Elementary is solely a town of Templeton building. That's the difference.
That's right.
You good, Tim? I'm gonna move on to Connor.
I'm good.
Yep, go ahead, Connor.
I think it's terrific to hear that the school committee was able to hit those benchmarks again this year. This request of Templeton merely codifies what the committee has been able to achieve over now, I believe, the last 4 budget cycles.
Okay, anything else on those sections that we need to anticipate? Okay, so we have an April 19th, a May 25, and a June 22, Jeff, so I'm not sure we need to schedule any more meetings. We've got 3, but at the April meeting, we might want to find another date.
I will actually come up with some additional dates for the next meeting, Jay. I will put those together, okay?
Terrific, okay. I think that does it. Mac, do you have anything else?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Good. So I want to thank everybody, and I would take a motion to adjourn.
Second,
So moved.
Okay. Thank you. Actually, I do need to do a roll call. Let me see. Ms. Taylor,
Yes.
Ms. Bowmill,
Yes.
Mr. Top,
Yes.
Ms. Guthrie,
Yes.
Mr. Terenzini,
Yes.
Ms. Bennett,
Yes.
Ms. Ellis,
yes.
Mr. Flynn,
Yes.
and Mr. Marks says yes. Thank you all. Have a good month, I guess, and we'll see you in April.
Okay.
Thank you.
you.
everyone.
Everybody, great discussion
Appreciate it.
tonight.